Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is John Rees. I am Professor of Psychology here at the Melbourne ACAP campus. Although, as with everybody the last year, most of 2020, we'll be doing everything online. My role is I'm what's called the Melbourne Discipline Lead, which means that I am the sort of senior psychology academic on the Melbourne campus. And I'm also the deputy head of school. The head of school is located in Sydney. So I'm going to give you a presentation tonight about some aspects of our psychology courses here at ACAP. Now you'll notice that you you can't unmute yourself. That's because we do have over 130 people here in the session, so otherwise it would get a bit chaotic and disruptive. So everybody has been forced into a mute. But if you do have any questions, what I'd encourage you to do is to use the chat box. There are ACAP staff who are monitoring the chat, and they will answer your questions as we progress. So you don't have to wait to the end of the session. It's perfectly okay for you to type any questions that you may have into the chat box as you are going through, as we are going through the presentation, and ACAP staff will answer those questions for you as we do progress. Just to let you know that this session is being recorded, so recorded for future people. So what you do write in the chat box will be recorded, just so that you're aware of that. So this talk will probably go for roughly half an hour, and then what I'll do is I will flip through the questions myself and see if there's any questions there that I may be able to answer of an academic nature. Just be aware that I am an academic. I'm not an admin person, so I can't answer any questions you might have about administrative questions, administrative issues, but I can answer any questions that you have about of an academic nature. I've been working at ACAP since the start of 2014, so I've been there quite a while now. And before that, I was working at RMIT, and then I've also worked at University of Melbourne and La Trobe University, which is where I did my undergraduate studies. So I've been a psychology academic all my working life, and I'm now working at ACAP and very, very happy working at ACAP. Okay, so let's get underway. So just a bit of an overview about ACAP. ACAP's actually been around for quite a long time. It's been around since 1983. You may not think that because you may think of it in more its modern version, but we have actually been around for quite some time. It's part of a larger private education provider called Navitas. ACAP is a private college. It's the arm of Navitas that takes university type degrees. It's very much a national organisation, a national college. We have campuses in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and I believe just opening one in Byron Bay, which is pretty exciting. So we have a lot of campuses. We're very national, and we have courses in psychology, counselling, criminology, and social work. We've had 13,000 graduates. So ACAP is a private college. It's not a university, but it is very much like a university. It sort of runs as a university along university lines, offering university type degrees. Many of the students who study here talk about ACAP as being a uni or going to university, because from a functional point of view, there really is no effective difference between ACAP and any other higher education provider or university. Okay, so one of the things that ACAP really prides itself on is quality of teaching. And one of the ways we can demonstrate that is with some of the government surveys that ask students, ask graduates about teaching, including this thing called the Student Experience Survey, the SES. And you can see that you've got ACAP's result there in the middle, and you've got the national average there on the right-hand side. You can see that for a lot of the key metrics, we exceed the national average. Overall quality of educational experience, we're higher. Teaching quality, we're considerably higher. Skill development, we're higher. Student support, we're considerably higher. And learning resources, we're higher as well. So this is publicly accessible information. It's being updated all the time. You can go and take a look at that by going to www.quilt.edu.au. And those numbers really do represent what we take very seriously, which is the quality of the student experience, the quality of the learning experience, and the quality of the teaching that we do provide. Okay, now, psychology. Now look, psychology is the most popular undergraduate subject in Australian universities. It's the most popular undergraduate subject in American universities and UK universities. And there are 43 universities in Australia, and I think 42 of them have psychology undergraduate degrees, including all of those in Victoria. So why come here? It's not as though you can't go and study psychology anywhere else. You can. So why come here? What does ACAP have as a point of difference that should potentially be appealing to you? Well, one is small classes. So one of the things we really do pride ourselves on is small classes. We cap our tutorial classes at 25 students. We don't have them, and many of them are much smaller than that. Some of the tutorial classes are 15, a dozen students. If we have on-campus classes, they also tend to be quite small. I ran one of the largest on-campus lectures at the start of last year before we went online, and it had all of 60 students in it, and it was considered big. And many of the on-campus lectures are considerably smaller than that. So we like that. It allows us to get to know our students and allows students to get to know us. So small classes, teachers who work in the industry, we've got teachers who are psychologists, teachers who work in a lot of areas. Those, if you do counselling electives, you've got counselling staff who are trained and experienced counsellors. And student placements, there are not too many courses in psychology that have student placements. The only undergraduate psychology course that has a student placement is the double major in psychology and counselling. That's the only one that has a student placement. So the postgraduate courses do, but they're a completely different story. But no, the undergraduate courses, the only one is the psychology and counselling double major. The Bachelor of Psychological Science, the double major with criminology, do not have student placements. All our degrees are fully accredited. They are the absolute 100% equivalent of any degree you would do at any university in the country. We all play by the same set of rules. Our degrees have to be accredited by the same bodies that any university's degrees do. So that's the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council and TEXA. And we actually just went through our APAC accreditation cycle last year in the middle of 2020. It's something that every provider has to do over a 5-year period. And we received glowing reports from the ACAP team who really commented most favourably on how our discipline was run, on the degrees that we were offering, on the structure, on the student feedback, and so on. So our degrees are absolutely 100% fully accredited, along with the same as any other university. And by the way, there are many places where their degrees are not fully accredited, where their degrees are provisionally accredited. Ours are not, ours are fully accredited. We also have flexibility. So we offer 3 intakes a year in February, June, and September. Very few places offer that. Now, here's the other thing. We offer all of our core psychology units in every term. So that means that if you need to repeat a unit for whatever reason, you don't need to wait a whole year to do that. You only have to wait for the start of the next term. So we have 10 core psychology units in our degrees, and they are offered at every term of the year. Now, they're offered on different campuses, of course, but they're offered on every term. So it's not the case that they're offered on every campus. That's not feasible, but they are offered in some form in every term. And very few, I don't know of another place that offers that degree of flexibility for students. We are private, so students do need to be funded. The mechanism by which students are funded for ACAP courses is something called fee help. You can pay up front if you wish, but fee help is the common funding pathway. Fee help is basically exactly the same as HECS. The difference is that you pay more. So your fee help debt is going to be higher than a HECS debt, but it is paid back in exactly the same way as a HECS debt is paid back. So the process is pretty much identical to HECS. It's just that the amount is more. There is a cap on fee help, a total cap. There's a $100,000 fee help cap. You can't accrue a fee help debt any higher than 100K, but that's, if you do an undergraduate degree, that's not going to get anywhere near that. So you don't have to pay anything up front. There's this mythical idea that because we're a private college, that you have to sign a check and pull out your credit card and pay some enormous amount of money up front. No, that is absolutely not true. That is absolutely not the case. You can get a government loan and pay it back under the standard HECS repayment schedule. Okay, so a few other reasons why students choose ACAP, which I'll come to later on, are the quality of teaching, and also the flexibility, the strong commitment to online. So, for example, when we had to move online, as everybody did, early in last year, we were able to completely transition psychology studies from on-campus to online within a couple of days with absolutely no disruption to student learning and no disruption to the student experience. So we've put a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of resources into online. We have on-campus as well, of course. We have on-campus, we have online, and you have complete flexibility as to how you engage with that material, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. Okay, every bit of student support you can get at a university, you can get at ACAP. We offer all the standard student support services. The student support people are magnificent. They are really incredibly knowledgeable, helpful, patient, and supportive. We know that a lot of our students are people who are returning to study. They may never have studied at higher ed before, so the idea of a university course is completely alien to them. The idea of university study is completely alien to them. They may not have studied for decades. Then again, they may have studied in the prior year. There's a very wide variety of students who come to ACAP and a very wide variety of students in terms of their background and their experience and so on. So we know that. We know that. We appreciate that. And so that's why we've got all the support mechanisms set up to help people transition and help people throughout their studies with us. And we've got a range of different student support people are running classes, groups, and available for individual consultations. So support is there. We're also like to think of ourselves as being a very socially aware college, and we represent that in a number of different ways, green issues, and also we have the Ally group, the Ally resource. This is part of our Pride and Diversity Network, okay? And we're delighted to stand with the LGBTIQA+ community, right? And there's an email there that you can contact if you want to get more information about that facility at ACAP. Okay, so how to study your way at ACAP. Like I said, the key word is flexibility. The key word is flexibility. So we have 3 terms as opposed to 2 semesters. The terms are 13 weeks in duration, and we teach in 12 of those weeks. There is a midterm break each term. You can go full or part-time. You can swap between the two. Okay, you can move from full to part-time, part to full-time. You've got complete flexibility there. We offer things on campus and online. On campus is, of course, completely COVID dependent, as it is for anything. So when I talk about this, I'm talking about this in a COVID-free world, but I'm sure you understand that we have to always take into account that certainly for the short-term foreseeable future, we have to be aware that COVID's going to impact the way that we study. So, you've got total flexibility with this. You can do some subjects online and some on campus. You can do elements of it on campus and some online. For example, you might want to look at your lectures online, but do your tutes on campus and so on. So there's a whole mixture of ways that you can engage with the material. Blended delivery is a term that we don't actually use in psychology. It's used in counseling rather than psychology. We don't really use the term blended delivery in psychology. We tend to think of it more as just flexible engagement with on-campus or online study. And there are lots of classes that are set in the sort of afternoon and early evening to accommodate the large number of students we have who work full-time or who have care responsibilities and who simply can't engage in their studies during normal business hours. We do have classes during normal office hours, but we have a lot of classes outside of those. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about psychology. We can define psychology as the science of human behavior and mental life. It's a study of the human mind and behavior. It's a science, okay? Psychology is very much a science, and every course in psychology that you will do in Australia takes a scientific approach, and our courses are science-based, as all accredited courses are in this country. That's what psychology is. It's first a science and then an application. So if you want to become a psychologist and work as a practitioner, then you need to study the science of psychology first before you go on to do the professional practice of psychology and training in the professional practice of psychology at the postgraduate level. Why do people study psychology? Okay, here's three classic studies in psychology. The basic reason is that psychology is interesting. In a previous life, I was one of the people in charge of Year 12 psychology in Victoria, which is an incredibly popular subject. In fact, it's the fourth most popular Year 12 subject in the country, in the state. About 16,000 students do psychology at Year 12 each year. And it's been like that since it started in the VC in 1993. It's just an incredibly interesting, popular thing. And people are natively interested in human behavior, in mental life, in why we do what we do. So it's just inherently interesting. These three critical questions based on three classic studies in psychology. Why are people obedient to authority to the extent that they will electrocute other people? This is based on a very famous series of studies conducted by a psychologist called Stanley Milgram. Stanley Milgram set up an experimental scenario to test the idea that people would obey authority figures to the point that they would deliver what they would understand to be potentially lethal electric shocks to total strangers simply because somebody told them to. It's a very interesting study from the point of view of social psychology, and it also raises interesting ethical questions that we discuss in the class. Why are people susceptible to having memories implanted into their minds? What you're seeing there is a slide from a famous series of studies conducted by Elizabeth Loftus on what was called eyewitness testimony, or how easy it was to manipulate eyewitness testimony. What Loftus did was showed people pictures of car crashes and then asked them questions about the car crashes about a week later. And what she did was she varied the wording in the way that she asked a question. For example, she might have asked a question, how fast were the two cars going when they collided? And then she'd ask another group, how fast were the two cars going when they smashed into each other? And the simple variation of the word changed people's estimation of the speed of the cars. And it also changed what people recalled seeing in the pictures. People would recall seeing things like broken glass, spilt oil, things like that, shattered windshields, whereas in fact in the pictures, none of those things were present. They were called false memories. So what Loftus's research illustrated to us was how easy it was for us to have our memories manipulated, and how easy it was to implant false memories into people simply by changing the way that people worded questions. And you can see the impact of that on eyewitness testimony in courtroom settings. And the very famous Zimbardo prison experiment, where Philip Zimbardo, one of the world's most famous psychologists, took a group of psychology students, allocated them to the roles of prisoners and guards, put them into a mock prison environment to basically see what happened. And to put it bluntly, things got out of hand. So a study that was meant to go for 2 weeks ended up having to be cancelled after roughly 5 days because the participants were getting too into their roles and it was starting to threaten people's well-being. Fascinating study from a social psychological point of view, but also incredibly interesting from a research ethics point of view. And we discussed both of those ideas in those courses. So there's 3 classic studies in psychology: Milgram's obedience to authority, Loftus's car crash eyewitness testimony experiments, and Zimbardo's prison study that we study in an undergraduate psychology degree to learn more about why people do what they do. And neuropsychology, what happens when you have 90% of your brain missing. What you're looking at there is a CAT scan of somebody who literally has 90% of their brain missing. Remarkably, that person was functioning relatively normally, relatively functionally. And the question is, how can one do that? So if there's one area of psychology that's really exploded in research interest over the last 20 years, it's been the relationship between brain and behavior. It's been looking at brain functioning and so on. And so we study that. Okay, the other area that people are interested in psychology is as a helping profession. So using psychology to help others. For example, we know that depression is the single leading cause of disability worldwide. More than 1/3 of a billion people, 300 million people worldwide experience depression. Over 250 million people live with anxiety disorders. Now, of course, it varies enormously in terms of the level of symptomatology and the impact that depression and anxiety has on individuals. But they are incredibly serious, important, and can be very debilitating conditions. Now, psychologists are very much at the forefront of doing research in these areas, and in working in intervention and treatment and therapy in these areas. So when you study psychology in the undergraduate program, you'll learn all about the scientific basis for these conditions, depression, anxiety, and other psychological conditions. And then when you go on to the postgraduate side of things, that's where you learn the various interventions and treatment paradigms for helping to work with people who are experiencing depression and anxiety. Okay, this is the sort of slide from hell. This is how to become a psychologist in Australia. It's a complicated pathway. Now, I'm not going to break this down because we talk about this throughout the undergraduate degree, but let me give you the sort of executive summary. Basically, it's a full-time 6-year process. So the first thing you need to do is an undergraduate psychology degree of 3 years full-time. You then need to do a 4th year of study, usually an honours year. And then after that, you have a couple of different options. One is to do a 2-year postgraduate master's in a specialised area of psychology, such as clinical psychology. Another option is to do a 1-year master's in general psychological practice, followed by a 1-year internship that you need to organise, or you can do a course. And the third option, which is rapidly closing, is to do 2 years of supervised work experience, totally outside of the university system. They're the 3 common pathways, soon to be 2. And I think that leads me into this, that the what we call the 4+2 model, the internship pathway, will soon be retired. And in fact, on 30th of June 2022 is the last date that anybody will be permitted to commence that program. So for you people starting your studies now, that program will not be available to you because you won't be finishing your studies by 30th of June 2022, or highly unlikely that you will be. And so you'll be looking at either a 2-year or a 1-year master's option as a pathway to registration. By the way, there are hurdles. It's not an automatic entry into honours, and it's not an automatic entry into postgrad courses. There are hurdles, and they are competitive hurdles, and there are quotas to get into both honours and to get into the postgraduate study. Okay. Okay, so I've already talked a little bit about studying psychology at ACAP. We do offer the full pathway of training from bachelor's through to master's. At the moment, our master's degree is only available in Sydney, but we are certainly planning on introducing postgraduate level studies in Melbourne that will allow people to do some form of postgraduate study in Melbourne. Right now, as of today, we have all of the bachelor's degrees in Melbourne, and we have the honours degree in Melbourne. But if you look at it nationally, you can do your bachelor's and honours degrees anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world for that matter. Postgraduate gets a little bit more complex. Some of the postgraduate studies must be done on campus, and at the moment they're only available on the Sydney campus. Other postgraduate courses can be done mostly online. That's sort of developing. So that'll be well and truly bedded down by the time you people get to that point. But certainly there are moves afoot to broaden the opportunity for postgraduate study so that students all around the country get access to some form of postgraduate study. Okay, as I said, we're fully accredited with the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council. We've got online and on campus. People often say because we're private, we must have a lot of international students, but that's actually not true. International students don't generally study psychology. It's not a particularly popular area of study for international students. We have nothing against international students, but international students will most likely go to a big university. That's their target area. The bulk of our student body is what we call return to study people. So people who want to make a bit of a career sea change or a study sea change, so they decide they'd like to come and study psychology, and that's the majority of our student body. So it's very similar to what universities would have, except probably a little older on average, because you've got people who are coming back to study in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, and so on. So that's the bulk of our student body. All right, so we like to emphasize what we call the core skills. So these are what we call the graduate attributes. These are the things that we hope that every psychology student leaves with, okay? And we'd like to think that they fall into, say, 5 main categories. Obviously, applying psychological principles to personal, social, and group issues. We'd love you to be able to develop some competencies that you could then apply to a whole range of different settings, personal, social, and group. Research plays a very central and important role in psychology education. And there's a strong emphasis on research. There's a lot of research training in psychology, and the capacity to be able to implement research, plan it, evaluate it, do it, think like a researcher, consume research is a really important skill. Critical thinking, effective communication, and acting professionally within an ethical framework. These are really the attributes that we would like every student to leave with once they've got their psychology degree. So what do we offer? Okay, my emphasis today is going to be talking to you about the undergraduate programs. So the undergraduate programs we offer, we've got the Bachelor of Psychological Science. We've got the Bachelor of Psychological Science in Criminology, that's a double major. And we've got the Bachelor of Psychological Science in Counselling, also a double major. Now, be aware of this. The psychology in all of those degrees is absolutely identical, right? There's no difference. So if you do any of those degrees, you are doing the same psychology units. It's what you do outside of the psychology units where the difference lies. So with the Bachelor of Psychology Science, you have to do 10 core psychology units. You have to do 3 multidisciplinary units, and you have to do 11 what we call electives. And the electives, which I'll talk about in a minute, can be from counselling, they can be from criminology, or we have our own psychology electives as well, and you can mix them all up. With the other 2 degrees there, the criminology and counselling double major, they are fixed degrees. So they've got a fixed structure. You have to do the same psychology units, 3 multidisciplinary units, and 11 criminology units or 11 counselling units, and you can't vary it. Okay, so they're fixed degrees in that sense. We have the 4th year, the honours year, and then we have the postgraduate programs. And the 2 postgraduate programs that I'm going to really speak about tonight are the Graduate Certificate of Psychological Science and the Graduate Diploma of Psychological Science. So there's entry at all 3 terms. By the way, that's incorrect for honours. Honours now has entry at all 3 terms, okay, not just term 1. So these are the programs I'm going to talk about. Okay, what can you do with a psych degree? One of the things that really frustrates me about psychology degrees is that people have this belief that the only people who should do them are people who want to become psychologists, and that's not true. A psychology degree is a fantastic generalist degree. 50% of students who do a law degree will never work as a lawyer, but there's no shortage of people wanting to do law degrees. Yes, if you want to be a psychologist, you have to do a psychology degree. But, the majority of people that do a psychology degree actually don't become psychologists, but they still end up having great jobs and making great contributions using the attributes that they've picked up in their psychology degree. So think about it. Think about those attributes that we spoke about earlier. They apply to all sorts of different areas outside of psychology. They're very general. They're very useful. They're very valuable. So, these are some of the areas that are listed down there. Health and social welfare, social policy and research, human services, disability and aging, mental health, juvenile justice and immigration. These are all areas where somebody with a psychology degree is going to be valued, where somebody with the attributes, the competencies, the skill, and the knowledge that you get from a psychology degree is going to be valued, okay? All right, so what are the entries to the undergraduate courses? So the entry requirements there, and there are people online who will answer these questions a bit more specifically for you there, are listed. In terms of the course delivery, as I said, for the psychology units, we teach over 12 weeks. There's a 13-week term, but 1 week is a break week. We have what we call lectures and tutorials, but there's only traditional face-to-face on-campus lectures for the first year units. For the first year units, we have a 2-hour lecture each week, a 1.5-hour tutorial each week, and so on. For the second and third year units, we have a different structure where we have a 1.5-hour tutorial each week, but instead of having an on-campus lecture, we have what we call pre-tutorial content and post-tutorial content. So that pre-tutorial content might be a recorded lecture, for example. It may be a series of mini lectures. It may be guided reading. It may be online activities. It may be a combination of all of those things, but it's not a traditional one-to-many, stand in a room, face-to-face lecture as such. We have that in first year, but we don't have that in second year and third year. What we have done is we have doubled the tutorial content in our degrees. So the tutorial content is now 1.5 hours over 12 weeks. And that's the main face-to-face interactive component. We also have for each unit a drop-in time, an online drop-in time where students can drop in very unstructured, no agenda, ask any questions they might have. And we have some post-tutorial. So the tutorial is like the core face-to-face activity. And then we have the pre-tutorial and the post-tutorial activities. And we have that over a 12-week period. So the tutorials are set at predetermined times, either on campus or online, and you are required to attend those. Okay, so let's talk about the Bachelor of Psych Science. So it's the first step to being registered as a psychologist, and you can do a major stream in criminology or a major stream in social welfare as well. You're not likely to do that because if you're interested in doing a major stream in criminology, you're probably going to do the double major in psych and criminology instead, but it is possible. You need to do 3 what we call multidisciplinary units, and these are taken by every student in the college. So these are a common multidisciplinary unit taken by every student in the college. You need to do the 10 core psychology units, and you need to do 11 electives. Now, the electives can come from criminology, social welfare, counselling, or psychology, or any mix of them. Okay, so there's a lot of flexibility in the electives. As I said, outside of the 10 core units, psychology offers its own electives. There's a real variety in the types of assessments. There's not many exams. We used to have a lot of exams. We don't have as many exams as what we used to. So the emphasis is now more on what we call competency-based assessments. So a lot of written work. There is a very strong emphasis on good writing skills in a psychology degree. So a lot of written work, presentations, group work, those sorts of things. There are quizzes, there are exams, but less than what there used to be. It used to be the case that every unit had an exam. That's no longer the case going forward. And we have changed the structure of the assessments to make them more in line with the current APAC requirements and to emphasize things that don't really fit too well within the exam context. Things such as a cultural awareness, things such as group work, things such as reflective capacity, and those sorts of competency-based areas. Okay, the second degree I want to talk about is the double major with criminology. Now, be aware that the psychology in that degree is identical to the psychology that I described previously. But what you do instead of the electives is you do 11 core criminology units. So those criminology units are presented by the criminology discipline. Okay, not by us, by another discipline. So that gives you a double major in psychology and criminology. And by the way, completing any of these courses renders you eligible to apply for the honours program. There's no preferential treatment, there's no quotas. At the end of it, all the students who complete their psychology degree, no matter what degree they've done, are all considered on a level playing field when it comes to selection into honours. Okay, so the psychology is identical, the multidisciplinary units are identical, but in this degree you do 11 specially chosen core criminology units to study certain aspects of criminology. And we're offering this degree because we know that people are really interested in criminology, and particularly in the nexus, but the relationship between psychology and criminology. And the third one is the double major in counselling. And the double major in counselling, again, has exactly the same 3 multidisciplinary and 10 core psychology units, but it actually has 8 core counselling. In fact, that's an error. I'm sorry, that's got 11 core counselling units to give you the 24 units. There's 24 units in every degree in an ACAP degree. That should be 11 core counselling units. And that's a double major that for students who want to work in psychology or counselling. Now, I'll tell you why people are so interested in this degree. And that is that one of the things that people can find a bit frustrating about a psychology degree is that it doesn't teach you any skills, any practice skills at the undergraduate level. The counselling does. Counselling does. In fact, when you finish this degree, you are eligible for membership of the counselling professional bodies. You're actually eligible to call yourself a counsellor. So a lot of people like this degree because it gives them that combination of the very practical counselling skills in concert with the psychology studies that you might want to pursue. Okay, so that's a very attractive degree for a lot of students. As I said, the psychology is exactly the same, and that's the one and only degree that actually has placement in it. Okay, that's the only one that's actually got placement in it, and that placement is part of the counselling side of things. Okay, and there's also a requirement for volunteering in that degree as well. Okay, so that's a very attractive degree because it has that nice combination of learning the science of psychology in concert with the practical skills of counselling. Okay, if you want to do fourth year, the fourth year that we offer here is an honours year. It is competitive. It is quota-based. The absolute minimum entry is a credit average for your psychology studies. The reality is that you'll need a distinction average for your psychology studies. So what is looked at for entry into honours are your 10 core psychology units, the GPA of your 10 core psychology units. And you will need a distinction average to get into the honours year. That's just the reality. It's competitive and it's limited in numbers of students that can be taken into it, limited by supervision capacity and a whole lot of other factors. And like I said, it says there that the average grade point may be higher than it will be. I'm telling you right now, it will be, and you will be looking at a distinction average to get into the honours program. And even though we do allow non-ACAP students to do honours, we do give preference to ACAP students. We make sure we like to look after our own students before we even look at outside students. So we will offer all eligible ACAP students a place in the honours. If there's places left over, yes, we will offer them to non-ACAP students, but we look after our own first and foremost. Okay, now, what if you've already got a degree? Now, we get a lot of students coming to want to study with us who already have a degree. What if you already have a degree? Okay, if you already have a bachelor's level degree, you don't need to do a whole bachelor's degree again. There's another pathway. Now, let's imagine that you've got a bachelor's degree that doesn't have any psychology in it at all. So you've got a bachelor of, I don't know, bachelor of music or a bachelor of engineering or something like that, and you didn't do any psychology at all. What you would need to do, first of all, is something called the Graduate Certificate of Psychological Science. Now, you can get into that if you've got any bachelor's degree in any field. Now, what that consists of is that's basically 4 units, and it's got one of the MALT units, the 2 first-year psychology units, and the second-year research methods unit. So it's got 4 units, okay, that you need to do in this graduate certificate. Now, if you pass those units, right, so if you pass those units, you'll get the Graduate Certificate of Psychological Science, but then you can transition into the Graduate Diploma of Psychological Science. So you go from Graduate Certificate to Graduate Diploma. And of course, the subjects that you completed in the Graduate Certificate are credited to you. You don't need to do them again. You've already done those. That can be done in 2 trimesters full-time, or you can split it up and break it up and take as, well, you can't take as long as you like, but you can do it over a longer period of time, part-time. So that's if you've got an existing degree, a bachelor's degree in any field awarded at any time, okay? You can enroll in the graduate certificate, which means you don't have to do electives and any of that sort of stuff, okay? And so you complete the graduate certificate and then you go into the graduate diploma. So the graduate diploma, now, once you complete the graduate certificate, you get into the graduate diploma. But there is another way. So let's imagine that you have a bachelor's degree, but in that bachelor's degree, which you did in the past, you did some psychology. You did some accredited psychology units. You might have done a whole accredited psychology degree. You might have done first year, something like that. If you've got that bachelor's degree, if that degree was awarded in the last 10 years, and if that degree included enough undergraduate psychology units, APAC accredited psychology units, then you don't need to do the graduate certificate. You can get straight in to the graduate diploma. But as I said, you have to have a bachelor's degree. It has to be awarded in the last 10 years, and it has to have included at least a full first year sequence, a full first year sequence of accredited psychology studies. Okay, they're the three conditions. If you tick those boxes, you can enroll straight into the graduate diploma and skip the graduate certificate. Now, the graduate diploma, again, does not have electives. It's only the core psychology units. The core psychology units make up the graduate diploma. The units, the psychology units in the graduate diploma are slightly advanced versions than what the bachelor students do. They have to be. That's because you are a graduate. You already have a bachelor's degree. And so they are called advanced versions. So there's like cognitive psychology for the bachelor students, cognitive psychology advanced for the grad dip students. Now, where they differ is in the assessments. So the assessments for the graduate diploma students will be at a level above the assessments for the bachelor students. Once you have completed the graduate diploma, you are eligible to apply for honours. Please note, this is not an alternative to honours. This degree is an alternative to the bachelor's degrees. You still need to do honours after you finish this degree, okay? So this is a bridge, this is a pathway, this is another way of getting to honours, right? But it is not an alternative. Okay, and again, but it's shorter because you don't have to do any of the electives. You can do it in a shorter period of time. So if you've got a degree, you've got two options. One is grad cert followed by grad dip. The other option, if you meet those conditions, is straight into the grad dip. We have a lot of students who do that. Okay, so if you do get into honours, honours is has changed. So this is yet to be updated. So the honours degree now offers entry into 3 terms. The honours degree is now available fully online. It's a fully accredited 4th year of study. It can be done in 1 year part-time, 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time. And it has a combination of a substantial independent research thesis of roughly 12,000 words and coursework as well. And that coursework covers a whole range of applied areas. Okay, now it says on campus in Sydney and Melbourne. Yes, there are on-campus classes in Sydney and Melbourne, but it can be taken completely online as well. So honours can be done online and on campus, and you can start the honours year in any one of the terms. So you don't need to wait for the start of the year. But as I said, the entry is competitive, it is quota driven, and you will need a distinction average in your 10 core psychology units to get an invitation into the honours program. Okay. All right, so how do you go about applying? You complete the application form online. Then a course advisor will be in touch with you 24 to 48 hours after you submit, give you advice, assist you with completing your application, give you information about fees in the application process, advise you on the best course and so on. And then you will be assessed, and if successful, you'll receive confirmation of your enrolment. Okay, so that's all I wanted to speak about with you today. As I said, we have course advisors sitting online, happy to answer any questions that you've got. There's a lot of chat questions here, so I'm not going to take a look. There's 205 chat questions, so I'm definitely not going to have a look at all of those. But are there any other questions that people might have before we call it a night? So I'll just work backwards from the most recent one. Can you join the undergraduate degree straight after year 12? Absolutely. So, yep, we would love to have more school leavers. So you're very, very welcome to join straight after, to enroll straight after year 12. You choose electives when you enroll, and you choose electives at the start of each term. So the graduate certificate in psychological science is effectively, it's a lead in to the graduate diploma, but it's also a taster for people who may not be quite sure that they know really what they want to do. And so they want to just sort of get a bit of a taste for what psychology is, and they can then move on. Okay. Some of these questions I can't answer. And they're coming in so quickly, I just can't keep up with them. So I'm just going to select a few at random as I'm going through. Okay, so what sort of employment opportunities come from doing psychological science? I sort of mentioned that earlier on in the talk. It's really very much any area that is involved that sort of values the attributes that a psychology student gets. So the things that I mentioned, such as communication skills, knowledge of human behavior, group processes, researchability, all those sorts of things. And I provided a list earlier on. So if you want to go back and take a look at that list, you can. It's a pretty broad range of topics, pretty broad range of areas. And in fact, during the course, we talk about this. So during the course, we actually talk about employment opportunities, future study options, and basically where an undergraduate psychology degree can take you. Okay, so somebody's asked a question about the assessments in the grad dip being above the level of a bachelor's degree. It's a bit tricky to sort of give you a specific example. This is actually driven by something called the AQF levels, and bachelor's degrees are at a particular level and graduate diplomas are at a level above that. So because of that reason, that the assessments in a graduate diploma have to be at a level above a bachelor's degree. They have to be more challenging. They have to be assessing different things. They have to be of a different nature. So, you know, it might be, I'll give you a very trivial example. Different exam questions if there's exams. So different essay topics if it's essays, things like that. But there are more subtle differences that you'll sort of learn when you go in. If you want to do electives, you do need to do a bachelor's degree because there are no electives in the grad cert and there are no electives in the grad dip. There's 3 intakes for all of our degrees, so intakes at the start of each term. Just have a look at some of the more recent questions down here. Okay, so what can students do if they don't meet the distinction average to get into honours or master's courses? Really, really good question. What we know is that around about half of the students who finish a bachelor's degree in psychology are studying the year after. Now, what are those other half people doing? Well, some of them aren't studying at all. They're taking a break. But what we do find is that a lot of our students go and study in other related areas because a bachelor's degree in psychology gives them excellent background and excellent capacities and capabilities and competencies for other areas, such as social work, such as counselling, such as youth work. Some move into teaching, speech pathology, areas such as that. So there's a lot of different directions that a psychology degree can take you in. Psychology. Okay. There's a couple of questions here that I'd encourage people to contact me individually if they've got questions. Okay. And many of these questions are being answered by the advisors, the National Course Advisors, so thanks very much for that. Okay, so what I might do is I might just leave the chat open at this stage for people to answer. So what I'll do is I will mute myself and my camera, and I will just leave the chat box open. I'll stop sharing, and but I will leave the chat open in case people have got any questions over the last 10 minutes or so before we have to shut down. But what I'd also encourage you to do is that if you have questions that are really pressing, please contact me. Okay, please contact me directly. If they're questions of an academic nature, I'm very, very happy to answer those questions for you. And it would probably be a better way to do it than by answering the chat where we're more pressed for time, and I can give you a bit more time and a bit more depth and detail. So if you want to email me with any questions you've got, you're very welcome to do so. So my email address is a really simple one. It's just my name, john.reece, John, .REECE, john.reece at acap.edu.au. So just john.reece at acap.edu.au. If you just go to the ACAP website, type my name in the search box, it'll come up. You can just even Google me. I think it comes up. Yeah, john.reece at acap.edu.au, and very, very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Some very interesting questions there, but they're coming in a bit too thick and fast for me to be able to do them justice. So I'd encourage you to email these at your leisure. I'll get back to you ASAP. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mute myself and stop my video now, but I'm going to leave the chat box open until 8. So if anybody's got any questions, they can answer, they can pop those questions there. But as I said, I do encourage you to contact me. So look, hope you found that interesting, everybody. Hope that was informative. If you do have questions, please do contact me. I know it's a big decision. It's a complex. We're trying to cram a lot of information into a short space of time. It can be very confusing. Ask the questions. You know, if you're not clear about something, if you're not, please ask. That's what we're here for. We're here to help you, guide you, educate you, and answer any questions that you may have. All right. So good luck, everybody. I wish you a good evening. I'll mute myself and my video now. I'll leave this open until 8, and then I'll shut down the meeting. So good luck, everybody, and all the very best.